This is the first quarter that the Assessments for Reflection project has been in DTR. And a quick overview of the project. Essentially, this project was aiming to find a way to get better feedback from past assignments for students and to use this feedback to improve on future work. The motivation behind this is that there's lots of data in various assignments, such as midterms or homework assignments, and all the students really see is the grade. This project is an attempt to exploit the data that exists from assignments and get more out of it to allow students to reflect on them and potentially improve. This project aims to focus on peer reviewing mostly because there exists a lot of other systems out there, and peer reviewing is a very popular technique of giving students feedback, specifically in class sizes that are greater than 200, because professors have a hard time giving that much feedback to that many students, which is why peer reviewing exploits the large size of classes to give students better feedback. So the research question that I was studying, based on reading the literature and seeing what other related works are lacking, is how can I design a system that gives students actionable and timely feedback to help them improve on future assignments? This is after researching some related works, such as Peer Studio or Mechanical TA, which are also peer feedback mechanisms. However, they focus mostly on rubric data and giving the student aggregate grade, rather than giving them suggestions to improve and really giving them actionable feedback. So initially, at the start of this quarter, this project was very new, so there was a lot of need finding that needed to be done. So I conducted some user interviews and I researched some related works. These are the interview questions that I used on the students which I interviewed, and I was trying to understand what they enjoyed from peer reviewing and what they thought could be better. And then I used this information to find various outcomes and obstacles. So the outcomes that I looked at were that students should be able to reflect on areas they lack in to create a plan to improve in those areas. And this essentially came from the fact that people thought that peer feedback either didn't give them enough data for them to know where they lacked, or it gave them too much data, and they couldn't quite pinpoint the areas in which they needed to focus. Additionally, we wanted to give students useful feedback, where useful I got as a definition from a variety of different literature sources and through user interviews, that feedback needs to be actionable, timely, succinct, and concrete. Timely means that it needs to be provided within 24 hours, and succinct means that it can't be overwhelming, but yet still concrete enough that it's actionable. While going through this project, I realized that there were really two different interfaces that I was going to be having to look at. One is from the reviewer side and one is from the reviewee side. The reviewer side is the student who's actually giving the review. And this is a really important factor because it determines the kind of data we can get to structure the reviewee interface. However, there are two major obstacles that are posed for the reviewer side, which is one is motivating students to do the peer reviews, because a lot of the feedback that I got from user interviews consisted of, why should I be doing this peer review? It takes additional time from my other schoolwork, and they don't really get much out of it. Additionally, the reviewer has a hard time giving quality feedback to students because they are not at the caliber of teaching professionals. So they aren't able to write feedback that might be as quality as what they would get from a professor. For the reviewee side, the person who's receiving the feedback, a couple of the obstacles included distinguishing areas in which they need to focus on, which was mentioned earlier that a lot of the feedback given in other peer review mechanisms doesn't quite pinpoint the specific locations that students need to focus on, which is why that's an obstacle I wanted to overcome with this project. The second one is managing time. Sources which talked about time management and how specifically when coming into higher education, students feel like they're thrown into needing to learn time management very fast, but they don't know it at the first time they enter. The next thing that I wanted to do was create a paper prototype. With these obstacles and outcomes in mind, I wanted to create some interface designs in order to overcome the obstacles. So I started out with a very low fidelity prototype, just to get some feedback from students. And as you can see here, the students, the areas that they need to focus on, and here are the rubric questions which they can be expanded to understand more information. However, this is a very low fidelity prototype, and it was difficult to get adequate feedback from it because students had a hard time understanding what was on the paper. So this was a very good learning experience for me because It's the first time I conducted research, and I realized what a paper prototype really needs. So then I moved on to version 2, where I tried to make it a little bit more concrete. And as you can see here, this is the student's solution, this is the actual solution, and then when they click on feedback, they can see the 3 areas they need to improve on, and as you click on one of them, it links to the area that they need to focus on, and there are some comments there as well. After doing this paper prototype, I conducted a status update in the DTR class, where I asked students how much this feedback would play a role in their studying, as well as like what does useful feedback mean to them, and some insight into the other obstacles I may have overlooked, or into different characteristics that could be used to improve this experience. One interesting factor that I got from this was that a potential way to overcome the obstacle of students not being able to give quality feedback would be through having professors pre-write feedback and then the students being able to choose them from a drop-down menu to give to the students to ensure that they're getting specific feedback but also written at the quality of a teaching professional. Then I moved on to version 3 of my prototype, which was a part of my final sprint. And I wanted to make it a bit more hi-fi. This is a fleshed out version that includes information about the question itself. Additionally, this quarter I was able to complete a URG as well as work on my research canvas. Much of this quarter was focused on defining my obstacles and outcomes this quarter. And I worked very closely with my design arguments to try and flesh out my arguments for why I'd be using particular interfaces, as well as including the related works to ensure that I had a good basis for why I was making the claims I was. The next steps for my project for next quarter would be to build a prototype for the reviewer side. Most of this quarter has been focused on the reviewee side, but towards the end, I realized that there is a much closer link between the reviewer and the reviewee interface, that it's necessary to have both components working together rather than in a completely separate mindset. I want to test this version of my reviewee prototype as well as the prototype for the reviewer that I'll build to determine whether obstacles have been accounted for or if there are new ones. Additionally, I want to understand how reviewees and reviewers will use the data. I also would like to research more to find new characteristics for the reviewer and the reviewee, whether that's through user interviews or through related works.